Happy Friday. Lots of news to get through today. Lots of questions, lots of thoughts for this rant today. And we're going to frame this entire EV discussion and kind of slow down. And a lot of articles we're seeing out there now around, CNBC finally having to, kind of report and admit that, hiring is at a historic low for 2024. Layoffs jumped in August. And that's technology being one of the biggest factors and sectors. We had shown for the last year or so, we've been talking about, yes, you're adding jobs over here to say Uber delivery, that type of stuff, but you're losing all these tech jobs. And that matters. Like whenever you're posting job numbers is where are they going? Where are they coming in? I think 30% in the US had gone to government type jobs. And what's the return on that? Like, what are you creating a value of that? Like, what is that as far as ingenuity, innovation, all those other things? And if it is that your tech sector is firing people, okay, maybe it's that they're letting go of a lot of the things they don't need, which, believe me, the big tech companies act kind of like government. They have lots of positions that are redundant, don't need to be there. They hire tons of people that are not required. And that's for a multitude of reasons. And that's a different conversation. So that kind of veers off on people always talk about how, capitalism and markets are very efficient and everything else. We haven't seen that necessarily in the tech sector at all. They've hired on massive amounts of people that really, I'm going to be a bit harsh here, but they're making the calendar for the year, or they're setting up the party for the year or something. There's lots of those. They're publishing a newsletter for the company about, holiday schedules and whatnot. So yeah, they let go of a lot of people. At the same time, there's this massive growth in AI. So let's kind of take that into account and go. So we see a slowdown. We see China slowing down. We see there's a multitude of reasons for that as well. And everyone's feeling it. Now, that could seem like, oh, this is going to be another doom and gloom conversation. I would say no, because most of us who have been paying attention, looking at data, we've been in this for a while. So we've actually been in the pain for a while being gaslit by all the mainstream news telling us, oh my God, this is the best ever. We're fighting inflation and it's no problem because we've got all these jobs. And then you're realizing, wait, no, we don't have all those jobs. Those numbers have been revised down. And then we're having a lot of layoffs. And those layoffs are continuing, especially in the tech sector, moving forward. So we're looking at like the EV story. We're in that space. I mean, that requires a ton of mining. And, we see whether it's Ford canceling EV production in favor of some of their ICE vehicles. They had thought that growth was going to continue at an upward pace. I'm not surprised. I mean, you can't force people. I mean, you can, but you really shouldn't force people that you have to use a certain type of product or car or anything. And if you are, you'd better have a great argument. And they don't. They don't. I mean, I know people that have bought into the narrative entirely. They think it's a strong argument. But if half your population doesn't see it as a strong argument, then you haven't made a strong argument. And you can nail that down to, oh, well, they're stupid, which they're not. Whatever it is, you have to reframe this in some sort of way. We've looked at this EV and in particular the automotive sector as being just like everything else. There's tools to use depending on the region, depending where you are. And we should probably look at this in a longer time frame rather than going, we're going to hit you with a hammer, tell you to convert over entirely right now and force the population to buy. That's not a great idea. I've sat in enough analyst conversations where they kind of knew that hybrid would play a big role. And even if you really believe in the narrative, you go, okay, well, hybrid for 5 or 6 years and then transfer over to EVs. That gives people enough time to get their head wrapped around it. It also gives a lot more time to get the batteries a bit more efficient. It also gives some time to get the charging stations. There's no infrastructure for any of this stuff. And this is the crux of the problem, is that it's an enormous undertaking, which we've talked about, to try to get an infrastructure in place to even adapt to this EV idea. And it's not done. I mean, I kind of pick on that, the Biden administration spending $7.5 billion on 7 charging stations, and there's like 499,993 left to go. But that money's it's not being done. You know, and it's like a lot of things. When you look around, say in the States or in Canada, and you go, okay, there's the Inflation Reduction Act. There's billions of dollars going out. Why are we not seeing massive increase in employment in construction and labor? Tons of nuclear power plants being designed and built, tons of new installations being built, you know, massive infrastructure in order to change the grid over. You shake your head and you go, well, how come this isn't happening? Where's the divergence between reality and what would take to do all of this and the conversation? And you know, this isn't just, you know, Ford. I mean, we move off from Ford, you know, looking at their layoffs to Toyota. They've cut their 26 global EV production to about 1 million units. Now, you'll remember they're also working on like hydrogen fuel cell as well. They've got a strong bet on that. And part of this issue too revolves around the infighting in the renewable space. It's shocking. The infighting, and it makes no sense, because if you're doing this for the idea of it being the environment and it being some common good, why that people are, you know, that are say for renewables / you know, offshore wind and solar will constantly attack nuclear. And I just shake my head and go, what's your motivation? What's your goal here? Like, is it actually the environment? Is it that you actually want to bring these numbers down and have power? That the infighting in that space is so crazy. It doesn't make any sense at all. And that helps. That doesn't help with the narrative whenever you have that infighting, because it shouldn't be there at all. It should be, yes, we've got many tools. We're going to apply them in the right regions that make the most sense. Solar, obviously, if you're in the desert, yeah, let's use it. Let's go. And we want to bring that conversation down into that middle ground of not only do you have to have a convincing argument for people to want to use and to switch and to do whatever and incentivize them for it, it has to be the right fit. Like you don't want to try to make a hydro dam in the middle of the desert. You probably could somehow do it if you spent trillions upon trillions. You could terraform, you could do it, but it doesn't make any sense. There's no economic sense. And I think that's what we're getting at is there's something else going on here that isn't adding up, and that confusion is apparent, and it's not getting across. And also, you can't. It never works, especially in a country like the U.S., to force people to do something. It can work in very left-leaning countries. And countries that say assume my government tells me what's right and wrong. My government tells me my rights. My government gives me that information. Well, then, yeah, you're easily told what to do and you'll abide. But that is not a lot of people, and also certainly not the U.S. So you have to make that strong argument, and it isn't necessarily being done. And this is, you know, floating over, as I said, to the hybrid space. And those should see a bit of a bump, though. And so I'd love to hear your thought as to, do you think it would be a smarter play to encourage hybrids first and, you know, kind of give people more options? And I know that's tough because, once again, it takes a lot of money to build the gigafactories for a company like Ford to say, listen, we're going to go all in with electric. Because we think the government's going to have our back, and they probably will. And I think even regardless of what happens here, you know, with any changing of power of any side, they're going to continue. I mean, the drive is towards having electric vehicles, and even for someone who says, you can't tell me what to do. I want to have my combustion engine. I want to have this and I want to have that. Okay, I think there might be some hangers on. You let them, but most people, I think if they like cars and they jump in an electric and they realize how kind of fun they are, I think they would be convinced over time, once they got the ideology out of their head and they go, oh, these things are pretty responsive. They're pretty wild. And they could see, yeah, there's infrastructure. I could charge this thing. And also, well, you're not going to cut me off, make me forced to use this type of power. And then you'll just up the cost so absorbently to recoup your costs that I can't even drive the thing. And that would be a fear. Why? Because that's the type of things that people do. Whether you're an extreme capitalist or you're a government or anything, that just happens. So people would be rightfully a little bit concerned about what that road ahead looks like. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's a complex conversation. I'm not pretending like it isn't. And I like to be in the middle of that space, because I know that, and it's just a fact, that energy is the solid foundation of providing wealth to any country. And some of this does shape around, and there's actually an interesting Sprott conversation. I think it's called Plug and Power. They just came out. I think they sent out an email about it this morning. Go to their website, take a look at Sprott. Good conversation on there. It's a podcast, and it's essentially of this social justice approach. And it is kind of what I kind of said, what the World Economic Forum, UN, and all these types that have said, is that it if we're taking in, say, in the US and Canada, 20 barrels a day of energy, the average person, and in a developing country, it's like 2. It's like a fraction. And in parts of Asia, it's 9 or 10. Well, then the thought will be, well, if we rose up the bottom and lessened those in the West to get it to a 14 for everyone, would that be considered equality? And that's, from my point of view, nonsense. I have no interest in that. I mean, I'd like to raise up a country and help them, but no, I'm not interested in hurting my country, my friends, my neighbors, everyone around me, those that helped build all of these things, in order to give it to someone else. That, to me, doesn't make any sense. There's only so far as, from my point of view, where my generosity goes. And once it's out of sight, out of mind, it's very tough to want that. So I know that that's a big movement of the entire, like, one world government. Everyone's the same and everyone should be. To me, that doesn't make any sense. And that's going to be a very hot topic just in itself. But it's interesting that they touch on that in that discussion. Now, that might be a bit of tongue in cheek, but, what do you think? Is that part of the plan? Is that, they've kind of, WEF and UN hinted that the West is going to take some pain. We're feeling that pain. And for them to have said that years ago, in order to pull off any of this, is that part of the plan? Is it that we have to give up in order to, because of our sins of the past, to help these other nations, which means we have to live a tougher life? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and if you're willing to do that. And I would suggest that even the ones that are out there protesting the streets with their cell phones and all of their gadgets and talking about the horrors of technology while using it, I would say that most of the youngsters have no interest in that. They want to have their social media, have their games, have their AI. So I think there has to be, what I'm saying is, and it comes along that idea of the Bureau of Minds I've kind of brought up before, is there needs to be a cohesive message that's true and real, to get away from a lot of the narrative and storyland stuff that is being pumped out there on all sides. So I'm not picking a side, on all sides. And if you want that message of having cleaner air, and yes, it might cost a bit, you have to deal with the fact that developing nations would be better off using liquid natural gas right now if we could get them off of coal. I mean, if we get Germany off coal, that'd be great. And it's tough because in that renewable space, like I said, there's no end to the constant misinformation, because they want one solution to work everywhere, and it can't. And it's tough to fight through. Believe me, I read this stuff all day, and it's so tough to try to keep on top of the arguments and the nuances of the arguments. And I'm certainly not a nuclear engineer by any stretch of the imagination. So it's challenging enough anyway, that when you're spending the amount of time that I spend on it to see what is actually true, what's narrative, and what the best solutions are. So I can imagine if you're Biden, if you're anyone trying to get access to the right solutions is very challenging. And I'll preface that by saying we didn't do the hard base work to begin with. There should have had to be a critical metals strategy years ago. China is now very well aware that we're on this critical metals push. And now we see with the tariffs that Canada's has included with hybrids coming, or sorry, not hybrids, electric vehicles from China. Because guess what? Yeah, they have a slave labor force they can use. They have all of the means of producing the critical metals and refining them. We don't have them over here. So yeah, guess what? They can make cheaper cars, cheaper EVs. So when they want to ship it over, now the West is saying, well, we're going to put 100% tariffs on them because our car companies can't compete. And once again, you have to ask, well, has that got anything to do with environmentalism then? Because if it does, shouldn't we be trying to get everyone to use these EVs rather than trying to fight price controls and making sure that we're taking care of our own industry? So something to think about, like how dire is this message? And it's tough because people now with the social media, they can go look this stuff up and go, wait, the message isn't matching with the actions. So I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are. And we're starting to see this slowdown also as the fight escalates between these BRICS nations, these developing countries who, once again, big complex conversation, who rightfully want to have some other means of payment other than having to resort to the U.S., are coming to terms with the U.S. finally acknowledging not only do they want to make chips on their own soil, they want to have battery factories, they want to start developing, manufacturing again, and China's saying, okay, fine. Well, then the battle's on. We're going to restrict some of our rare earths. We're going to restrict some of our other, say we're not going to buy as much soybeans and whatnot from Canada. We're going to start putting tariffs on your stuff. And then the fight escalates and escalates. That's going to cause a lot of poverty as well. So it is an exceptionally difficult situation we have in with where we found ourselves. That, is going to be challenging here for the next little while. And I certainly don't fault the current U.S. administration for having very strong concerns about China. And once again, let's distinguish between like the Chinese people and then the ruling party, just as I would with the ruling parties of politicians in the U.S. compared to the average U.S. citizen. Exceptionally different people. They're not the same. It's not the same conversation. One's very much likable and one's very less likable. I'll put it that way. And that would be the same for China. I mean, most Chinese citizens wouldn't think, oh, I'm a communist, or I live in a communist nation, or a semi-quasi nation. They would just be good, generally overworked, hardworking people that traditionally in their history have strong filial piety, strong family units, a lot of the same kind of Western ideals that we have, but unfortunately got absolutely destroyed and disintegrated and whatnot through Mao's Long March and communism, which that goal is to do, is to destroy your history, your culture, your ancestry in order to bring up the beautiful new utopia. That's a separate conversation, but I just wanted to distinguish between when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about this, the power party in play, and not that there aren't, most of the population probably being great people that are just hardworking and would love to live in the West and work their ass off, which we find and see, and especially here in Vancouver, we see a lot of. They're willing to work hard. They love their families, have strong family units. Like I said, these are very similar values. So we're seeing a lot of this shift and a lot of this power play going on. And unfortunately, the West, because they didn't have a very strong plan, they kind of jumped in, and maybe because they realized, oh boy, it's now or never. And that is going to be a long-term fight, because whoever wins the shift of power or the non-shift of power, it's going to continue. It's going to continue. Now, on the good side, and once again, let me know your thoughts. I don't think there's any surprises here. People that do follow mining and follow a lot more data in regards to the economy aren't surprised by the numbers. They're not surprised by the high inflation. They're not surprised by the job numbers. And most people who also look at the average person, they see they're struggling. It's not great out there. And that's a good thing, though, because the gaslighting from the mainstream media for the last long while means we're already in it. So we've gone through some of the pain. Once they admit it and it started announcing it, well, then the clock is on, and we probably, because we've already been in it for a while, we're going to come out a bit faster than when they finally kind of announce it. Yes, things aren't as amazing as we thought. And that'll happen from the mainstream news eventually, like they do with all the stories that were once conspiracy theories and now all true. They'll eventually come out and admit that, oh, this is what this was and this is that. And that's fine. That's what their job is. That's what they get paid to do. I mean, they have advertisers and they are funded to get a message out to the masses. But on a good note here, First Majestic to expand in Mexico. So they buy out Gatos Silver, $970 million. Big news. This ties in because we need tons of silver for all of the solar panels and whatnot. That's slowed down as well in China, as we see, but that won't slow down forever. The amount of solar panels that you need is huge, and they're building out huge farms in China, Australia. There are some in the desert as well, in like Saudi Arabia and whatnot. So it's good to see this expanding. And the likes of First Majestic, this is a strong move as well, because I'm going to assume here that they're getting grandfathered within any deal they do, any project regarding open pit mining, because that's coming under looks in Mexico, which is causing a bit of a stir and a lot of people kind of concerned as to what Mexico's up to. But hopefully they'll be pragmatic and understand that in order to feed the beast of solar panels, the need for silver is shocking. It's incredible. And this is a good, strong move. And that's a good sign in the mining sector too, to see a company like First Majestic applying capital right now. I think this is very good. The other one in regards to mining that I think is worth tying into, and that does tie in everything as well, is this Perpetua Resources. They finally, I think the stock went up 12% yesterday, not 20, 12%. They finally got U.S. government approval for their antimony and gold project in northern Idaho. So gold, yeah, we like gold. It's great. But it's the antimony that is the real interesting one, because you need antimony for all of your chips. And once again, no surprise, China is the dominant producer of antimony. So this means that, yes, there's a bit of a supply now in the U.S. to feed that structure. They're building all the chip manufacturing plants now back in the U.S. So we're starting to see this story is developing. It's coming true. It's going to take a little bit while. Some of the money is being spent properly. And that's the positive here. And I think once people see a lot more effort, and we'll go through this couple of months of very tense, time, that this will continue. And I think it will. We start to see the application of these funds and money, and deals start to come together a bit more. Things will pause and slow down. But once again, it's a matter of money as well. And the way I look at it, if you want to tell if a narrative is true or not, you have to look at the actions and not just the words. You have to look, in this case, in the markets to BlackRock, State Street, these types of companies that have control of all the money. I know people say, oh, they don't really have control over the money. Well, they have all the voting right control over these huge, like, trillions. I think it's 23 trillion right now. How much money are they putting into solar, nuclear, all of this? You can find out. It's not as much as you think. So if you can't convince them, the guys with the money, and you have to keep on printing it in order to fund it from government loans, that tells you something as well. It's not that BlackRock or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan don't have very smart analysts that are very well in tune with all of the science out there. These are smart people. So like all things, you follow the money. You'll listen less to the narrative, just as you would in my role of, we can tell lots of great stories and exciting stories, but if you follow the money, you're more than likely going to be better off than if you listen to great, fantastical stories, whether it's in AI or whether it's in fusion or whatever else. There has to be a reckoning, a return of investment or of equity, and see where all that smart money is playing. And that, as I'll wrap up my little rant here, love to hear what you think on that, is that why is there such a divergence then of money being applied into gold? People looking now, I mean, it's very small. I mean, if you compare it to like an AI or a tech, I mean, it's fractional. But the fact that it is getting a lot of news, the fact that people are to some degree understanding what BRICS is, why they're building their own monetary system, or was it M? Oh God, I forget what the name of it is. I can't remember it. Bad mistake here. Regardless, we're going to find out some news from BRICS very soon as well. And that message, the more we can get out, it causes people to be excited to go research for themselves, to go, wait, I've never heard of this BRICS thing. Of course, if you're in mining, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyone new, go, I don't know, what does this mean? What does this mean that these countries want to be able to settle on their own? They don't want to use US dollar. Like, what does that look like for world power? And this world power structure is currently in flux. And it's going to continue to be. So things are developing very rapidly. This fall is going to give us a lot of answers, not every, but it's going to give us a lot. And we're going to get to see a bit clearer where things seem to be going. And if nothing else, as chaotic as things are, is a bit stressful. I think we're already in the pain for a long time. It still means there's still some to go, but there's a lot of hope on the other side. There's lots of debate as well as interest rates. We won't even get into that because that's a whole other thing. But you can see these are only part of the issues that are in play right now. I mean, there's so many things that people have on their mind that it is a bit overwhelming. And at least here in the fall, we're going to get to see a bit more clarity on some of it. And I'd love to see what your thoughts are on that, and where you think we are now and where you think we might be in Christmas. Certainly, we think, regardless of any kind of slowdown, there's a big upside in mining. Either way you want to go, whether you want your chips, whether you want your AI power, whether you want any of this stuff, it requires a ton of energy. And even if there's a slowdown in, say, solar for a year or two, or these are long-term themes that aren't going to change. They're just not, because there is a place for all of it. These are tools in the tool belt. And I think the more open we are to that idea, instead of it being told and forced that we have to do this, have that, go, listen, it's just a tool. If we can get better air quality, awesome. If we can have a cleaner environment because of it, great. But part of that issue, once again, as I wrap it all up, is the narrative and the story doesn't match, and it could be done better. They really need to have a PR person that can sum up everything. And maybe that's why a Bureau of Mine would be good. A one-stop shop that helps to get that message out clearly. Here's all the information. Boom, has its own process of permitting, development, and getting mines right fast to market to get the metals that we need to get going and to be able to rely on ourselves. And especially for Canada being a natural resource country, to feed all these tech companies all of these awesome solutions that we're going to need and all the energy that we need. Anyways, everyone, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Let us know your thoughts. And thanks for listening to the rants.